They say if you look hard enough for the truth, it will find you. I wasn't even looking when it happened. It was a Monday evening, just another ordinary day in our suburban home in Connecticut. I had come home after a long day at work and was preparing dinner in the kitchen. Meanwhile, our little robot vacuum, an expensive gadget my wife Laura insisted on buying last Christmas, was whirring its way around the house, diligently sucking up dust from the hardwood floors. I remember stirring the pot of marinara sauce on the stove when I heard the vacuum's distinctive chime from the bedroom down the hall, indicating it was stuck. Sighing, I turned off the burner and went to rescue it. This wasn't the first time the device had gotten itself trapped. Usually, it entangled itself in stray charging cables or curtains. As I walked into the dimly lit bedroom, I saw the round device half-wedged beneath the bed frame, its wheels spinning uselessly. "Hang on, little guy," I muttered, kneeling down. I reached under the bed to tug the vacuum free. It came loose along with a tumbleweed of dust bunnies and something else, a small, crumpled piece of paper. I picked up the paper curiously. The vacuum must have found it hiding under there, dragging it out into the open. Straightening up, I unfolded the note. My heart skipped a beat as my eyes scanned the hastily scribbled words. At first, the handwriting was unfamiliar. It certainly wasn't mine, and it didn't look like Laura's neat cursive either. I walked over to the nightstand and flicked on the lamp, holding the note under the warm glow to read it clearly. "Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. Until next time. R?" I read it again, slower, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something innocuous upon second glance. They didn't. Each word was a dagger. "Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. Until next time. R?" I felt a chill crawl up my spine. My hands began trembling without my permission, the paper rustling as I struggled to process the meaning. This had to be a mistake. A note from someone else's life accidentally mixed into ours. But it had been under our bed. Our bed, where my wife and I slept every night. The bed in which, if the note wasn't lying, we apparently weren't the only ones who had been sharing intimate moments. I sank down slowly to sit on the edge of the bed, the room suddenly tilting as if the floor had dropped a few inches. My eyes stayed glued to that slip of paper. The words began to blur as anger and confusion fought for control in my chest. Who the hell was R? "Laura," I called out, my voice sounding strangely hollow. But my wife wasn't home. Right. She had texted me earlier that she'd be working late, a last-minute appointment with a client. She's a licensed psychologist with her own small practice, often seeing patients well into the evening. I had always admired her dedication, how she'd take emergency calls or squeeze people in who were going through crises. It wasn't unusual for her to be out this late on a weeknight, so I hadn't thought twice about her message. Now my mind raced. Last night was incredible. That implied last night she had been with someone. Someone who clearly wasn't me. Last night, Sunday night? We had gone to bed together as usual, hadn't we? Actually, memory flooded back. She had been unusually tired and went to bed early around 9 p.m., claiming a migraine. I had stayed up watching a recorded ball game in the den to let her rest. When I finally came to bed around midnight, she'd been fast asleep, or so it seemed. Had she slipped out after I fell asleep? Or had it not been Sunday night but some other night? My stomach lurched. Could it have been Friday night when I was out of town visiting my brother? I recalled that I'd driven up to Boston for a quick overnight trip to help my brother move apartments. Laura said she couldn't join me because of her client appointments. Did she use that opportunity? The possibilities buzzed in my head like a swarm of angry bees. I realized I was crushing the note in my fist, my knuckles white. Carefully, I smoothed it out on my thigh as if handling evidence from a crime scene. Because that's what this was beginning to feel like, a crime, a betrayal in progress. The chill in me was quickly boiling into anger, but I fought to keep a clear head. I needed to be sure I wasn't jumping to conclusions. Perhaps R stood for something else? Perhaps it was a misunderstanding. But what misunderstanding could possibly explain this? If it was meant for someone else, what was it doing under our bed? And who else's bed could it have been but ours? My eyes drifted under the bed again, searching the darkness for any other clue. The robot vacuum's green indicator blinked as if in quiet affirmation that it had done its duty. It felt like a conspirator revealing a secret. I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture of the note. Instinct, maybe, or paranoia. I noticed then that my hands were still shaking. I set the note carefully in the top drawer of my nightstand and closed it. My mind was racing in 100 directions. I needed to talk to someone, to sanity check this. But who? Certainly not my wife. Not yet. I wasn't ready to confront her without understanding the full picture. If I burst out accusing her without proof beyond a note, she might just lie, cover her tracks, make me feel crazy. And maybe I was crazy. Crazy to even consider that Laura, my Laura, could be unfaithful. We had been married for 7 years. We had our ups and downs as any couple, but I thought we were happy. We had talked casually about trying for a baby soon. We had just celebrated her 34th birthday with a weekend trip to Cape Cod a month ago. She had been affectionate, joyful even. There were no obvious signs of discontent, no glaring rifts between us recently. Sure, I work long hours sometimes. I'm a sous chef at a restaurant downtown, and the hours can be brutal. Late nights, weekend shifts. There were nights I'd come home past midnight, exhausted and smelling of garlic and smoke. But she knew that was part of the package when she married a chef. And she always said she was proud of how hard I worked, how passionate I was about cooking. In turn, I was proud of her for building up a successful therapy practice in her early 30s. We were a modern couple, both with demanding careers, but we made it work. Or so I thought. My mind latched onto that detail. I am often gone nights and weekends, times when she could have... No, I shook my head as if physically tossing out the thought. There had to be another explanation. Maybe R was a former patient thanking her innocently, but last night was incredible is not something a patient would write to their therapist after a session. At least not a therapy session. Unless my wife's job and personal life had crossed in an unforgivable way. My blood ran cold at the realization. What if R was a patient? That would mean she not only cheated on me, but violated her professional ethics in the worst possible manner. Having an affair as a therapist with a client would destroy her career if it came out. But I was getting ahead of myself. I needed facts. Right now, all I had was speculation and a damning little note of passion that I desperately wished had never been found. I paced the bedroom floor, adrenaline surging through me, making my limbs tingle. The smell of marinara sauce wafted faintly from the kitchen, reminding me that dinner was still half-cooked on the stove. But I couldn't eat a bite now. I had lost my appetite in an instant. One thing was certain. My life might have just changed in the space of a minute, all because of a dutiful robot vacuum and a scrap of paper. I glanced at the clock on the nightstand. It was 7:45 p.m. Laura likely wouldn't be home for another hour at least if she was indeed working late. For all I knew, she could be with him right now. The thought turned my stomach. I felt a sudden urge to call her, to demand what the hell she was doing, who she was really with. But I closed my eyes and took a deep breath instead. If this affair was real, confronting her in a blind rage could just drive her to defensiveness or more lies. And if by some minuscule chance there was an innocent explanation, I risked blowing up my marriage over a misinterpretation. No, I needed to keep calm and gather more information first. I needed to be smart. I had been blindsided, but I wouldn't be stupid in how I reacted. I turned off the lamp, pocketed my phone with the photo, and left the bedroom. The vacuum whirred back to life now that it was free, continuing its mindless circuit. I walked back to the kitchen in a daze, heart-pounding, mind-running scenarios non-stop. As I stirred the sauce absent-mindedly to keep it from burning, I made a silent vow. I would find out exactly what was going on. And if my worst fears were true, if my wife was indeed betraying me, then God help them both because I was not going to take it lying down. Chapter 2. Quiet Suspicion. I managed to collect myself before Laura got home. I forced myself to go back to the stove, stirring the sauce until it gently bubbled, and even cooked up some spaghetti to give my hands something to do. The motions were automatic. My mind was elsewhere entirely. By the time I heard your car pull into the driveway, I had plated our dinners, though I doubted I could swallow a bite. The front door opened and in walked Laura, looking a bit tired. She was still dressed with her work attire, a crisp white blouse and navy slacks, the typical professional yet approachable look she cultivated for her therapy sessions. Her chestnut brown hair was pulled back loosely, a few strands escaping around her face. She gave me a warm, apologetic smile as she dropped her handbag on the entryway table. "Hey, hun," she called, walking into the kitchen. "Sorry I'm late." "No problem," I replied, amazed at how calm I sounded. I poured marinara over the pasta on each plate, keeping my eyes down so she wouldn't see anything off in them. She came over and pecked my cheek. I could smell a trace of her perfume, vanilla, and jasmine, mixed with the faint scent of coffee. Mmm, smells good, she said, eyeing the plates. But you didn't have to wait for me. Figured I'd cook since you were busy. I handed her a fork as we sat down at the small kitchen table. She sighed and rolled her neck as if trying to release tension. Yeah, it's been a day. Thanks for this. We began to eat. I forced a forkful of spaghetti into my mouth just to appear normal. She twirled her fork, then paused. You okay, Mark? You're quiet. I realized I hadn't said much at all. My brain was so occupied with the note in the other room that making small talk felt impossible. I scrambled for something to say. Yeah, just a bit tired. Work was hectic, I lied. She nodded sympathetically. Same here. Mondays always are. My last client especially. It ran way over time. My ears perked up. She was volunteering information without me even asking. I tried to sound casual. Oh, what happened? Laura shrugged, taking a sip of water. Just a crisis situation. He's going through a messy breakup and wasn't in a good place. I couldn't exactly cut him off at the 50-minute mark, you know? Sometimes people just need extra time. My jaw clenched involuntarily, but I kept my tone even. That was the 7 p.m. client, right? I knew she normally ended sessions by 8 p.m., and she got home after 9. She hesitated just a fraction of a second. Someone else might not have noticed, but I'd known her long enough. Yes, the 7 p.m. Actually, I had a brief call with another patient right after, which is why I'm even later. Sorry again. A lie. It had to be, or at least a distortion of truth. The tightness in my chest returned. She was accounting for her time, preemptively excusing why she was late. Maybe it was true, and maybe it wasn't. But after that note, I found myself doubting her every word. It's okay, I replied, forcing a slight smile. I know your work can be unpredictable. She smiled back, seemingly relieved. How was your day, though? Everything all right at La Trattoria? She asked about the restaurant. Normally, I'd complain or laugh about a kitchen mishap or an annoying customer. Tonight, I had to dredge up a fake anecdote just to fill the space. I mumbled something about a supplier messing up an order and me having to improvise a special. She nodded, conversation moving on, but my heart wasn't in it. All I could think of was how natural she looked, how at ease, how normal, as if nothing was amiss. She'd just potentially spent the evening, or at least part of it, wrapped in another man's arms. And here she was chatting about dinner like any other night. It made my skin crawl and blood boil at once. We finished dinner, and Laura offered to clean up since I cooked. I let her gather the dishes. Normally I'd join her at the sink, but I needed a moment alone. I retreated to the living room, pretending to check something on my phone. From where I sat, I could see her washing plates at the sink. She had rolled up her sleeves, exposing her slender arms. These mundane details, her humming softly while doing a chore, it was all so painfully ordinary. A perfect little domestic scene, except for the secret wedge now driven between us that only I was aware of. I noticed something then. Her left hand. As she scrubbed a pot, I realized she wasn't wearing her wedding ring. My heart thudded. When had she removed it? She always wore it to work. She said some couples therapy clients found it reassuring that she understood marriage personally. So why was it off now? I stood and approached under the guise of grabbing a glass of water. Up close, I could confirm her ring finger was indeed bare, a pale line where the band normally sat. Did you take off your ring? I asked, keeping my tone neutral, genuinely curious what explanation she'd give. She glanced at her hand with an "oh" expression. Yeah, I forgot to put it back on after the gym earlier. I realized halfway through my afternoon that I'd left it in my jewelry dish. Felt weird without it. She gave a little chuckle. I was rushing today. Sorry, didn't mean anything by it. Laura did go to the gym some mornings, though she hadn't mentioned it today. Could be true or another lie. I nodded slowly, sipping my water. No worries. Just noticed, that's all. Inside, the idea that she might be taking off her ring for someone during her day gnawed at me. Did she remove it during her rendezvous with R, so she could pretend to be unmarried, guilt-free? Or perhaps because wearing it while cheating made her feel too guilty? I swallowed the bitter taste in my mouth and retreated, saying I'd go take a shower. Really, I needed to get away from her before my facade cracked. In the bathroom upstairs, with the door locked, I turned the shower on but didn't step in. Instead, I sat on the edge of the tub and ran a hand through my hair. My reflection in the mirror across from me looked back, eyes a little wild. I couldn't confront her now, not without more than circumstantial evidence, not with anger still clouding my judgment. Think, think, Mark. I decided I had to know more. Who was R? If it was a client, her calendar or client list would help. She keeps a leather-bound planner in her home office where she jots down her appointments, I recalled. Many therapists use digital calendars, but Laura always liked writing things down, then transferring to an online system later. It served as a backup and a quick reference at home. She had converted our spare bedroom into a home office, which she used for paperwork and sometimes teletherapy sessions. That room was mostly off-limits to me, not by rule, but by respect. I hardly went in. This might be my chance. She was downstairs finishing cleaning up. After that, she often liked to unwind with a book or TV in the living room. If I took a shower long enough, maybe she'd settle in and give me a window to slip into her office. I quickly stripped and hopped under the water to at least wet my hair, so that if she noticed later I could say I showered. After a minute, I toweled off, put on my pajamas, and listened at the door. The water had masked her footsteps, but I didn't hear anything now. I crept out and peeked down the staircase. The living room lamp was on, and I heard the faint sound of the TV. Good. She was likely ensconced on the couch with some Netflix show. Moving quietly, I padded down the hallway to her office door, the one room with the door closed. Gently, I tried the knob, unlocked. The door opened with a soft click and I slipped inside, shutting it behind me. I flicked on the desk lamp rather than the overhead light, just enough to see. My pulse pounded in my ears, worried she might hear me snooping. But the TV noise should cover any small sounds. Her office was orderly as always, a neat desk with her laptop, a couple of file cabinets against the wall, a bookshelf stuffed with psychology texts and journals. The leather planner was right on the desk next to her laptop. I sat in her leather swivel chair and flipped open the planner to the current week. My eyes scanned today's date, Monday. She had her sessions listed in her looping handwriting. 9 a.m., initials of a client maybe, 11 a.m. And so on. She keeps confidentiality by not writing full names, usually just first name or initials, I recalled. For 7 p.m., it said R7 to 8 p.m. There it was. Just an initial, but an initial that matched the note. At a time that stretched well beyond 8, I felt a surge of adrenaline. R, the client she claimed had a crisis and needed extra time. How convenient. I carefully leafed back through previous weeks. Yes, R appeared multiple times, usually once or even twice a week, often in evening slots. Sometimes just R, sometimes a first name Ryan. Ryan, that must be him. I had a name now. Flipping further back, I saw the first time Ryan appeared was around 5 months ago. A new client intake, perhaps, since prior to that there was no R. He was initially once a week. Then, in recent 2 months, he started appearing more frequently, sometimes with stars or underlines, maybe indicating importance or cancellations rescheduled. And almost all were evening appointments, last of the day. My head swirled. She was scheduling him at times convenient for having no other clients after, times when no one else would be waiting. My jaw tightened. If she planned to spend extra time with him, personal time, the last slot would be ideal to avoid raising suspicion among colleagues or overlapping clients. This was looking worse by the second. I took out my phone and snapped photos of the relevant planner pages, especially any with Ryan on them. One showed a session on Friday evening 2 weeks ago, and another on the Saturday morning I had a work brunch event. I remember I had to go early that day to the restaurant. So she'd even seen him on a weekend when I wasn't around. Unbelievable. Then I saw it. Last Friday had Ryan 6 p.m. with a small note in parentheses. Home. Home? Did that mean she saw him here at our house or at his home? She never sees patients at our home as far as I know. My breath caught. If she brought him here for a session, or for something else under the guise of a session, that could explain the note under our bed. Maybe they never made it to her office that day at all. A wave of red-hot anger surged in me so suddenly I had to close my eyes. In our house. I pictured them here, perhaps on our living room couch talking, or worse, tumbling into our bedroom. The betrayal deepened in that instant. hurt and rage twisting together. I forced myself to stay focused. Emotions later, right now, gather evidence. I carefully returned the planner to exactly how I found it, making sure the ribbon bookmark stayed at the current week. I checked that none of the drawers or cabinets were locked. One file drawer was locked tight. Perhaps patient files or notes were in there. Her laptop was sleeping, the screen dark. I knew her password, at least I knew the one she used for a lot of things. Early in our marriage, we'd shared some passwords for convenience. Unless she'd changed them recently, I might get in. I pressed a key. The screen lit up, asking for a login. I typed her old favorite password, hands trembling. Lulu 1987, a nickname and birth year she often used. The system thought for a moment, then a welcome screen appeared. I was in. I navigated to her documents. Most were client reports labeled vaguely. I didn't have time to search thoroughly, and I didn't want to leave digital traces. Instead, I opened her email client. She had an email account specifically for her practice. A quick search for Ryan there might reveal something. I typed Ryan in the search bar. Several emails popped up. Some looked like scheduling or billing correspondence. But one thread from 2 weeks ago caught my eye, titled Follow Up, and the snippet showed, "Hi Ryan, just checking in." I clicked it open. It was a professional-sounding email about coping strategies they had discussed and offering to schedule another session, standard therapist stuff. But attached to it was a document. I clicked the attachment. It was a PDF of an article about dealing with anger after a breakup. Possibly something she sent him as part of therapy. Nothing scandalous on its face, but the context clicked. She'd said tonight that her last client was dealing with a messy breakup. Ryan's breakup? If he'd come to her after a romantic breakup of his own, that might have evolved into this mess. I was about to search more, but I heard the TV turn off in the other room. Panic jolted through me. I quickly closed the email, then the laptop lid, praying it wouldn't show some recently accessed clue later. I stood, turning off the desk lamp. As quietly as possible, I opened the office door and slipped out. Down the hall, I saw the living room lights go dark. She was probably coming upstairs to the bedroom. I moved swiftly to the bathroom again, ducking inside just as I heard her footsteps on the stairs. I flushed the toilet to make it seem like I'd been in there, then stepped out, feigning surprise as we nearly bumped into each other in the hallway. "Oh, hey," I said, acting casual. She had a laundry basket in her arms, likely collected from the dryer. She smiled. "Hey, I was just going to fold some laundry before bed. You and your late-night chores," I teased lightly, trying to mask my racing heart. "I'm done in the bathroom if you need it." "All right. You heading to bed?" she asked. "Yeah, I'm beat," I lied, though in truth I doubted I'd sleep a wink. I passed by her and headed into our bedroom, my mind reeling with what I'd just discovered. I had confirmation now, at least partially. R is Ryan, a client, and she'd been seeing him very frequently, likely beyond normal therapy. Possibly at our house on the very night I was away, and she had meticulously failed to mention any of this to me beyond generic working late excuses. As I climbed into bed, a new feeling settled over me, cold and resolute. The hurt was there, yes, but also a grim determination. Laura wanted to pretend everything was normal? Fine. I could play along for now. The longer she didn't know I was onto her, the more rope she'd have to hang herself, and the more time I'd have to prepare for what came next. Lying there in the dark, I listened as she went about her routine, the quiet murmur of her moving in the other room, then the click of the bathroom light running water as she brushed her teeth. My mind raced through a checklist of things I'd need to do, like a chef calmly assembling ingredients for a complex recipe. Gather undeniable evidence of the affair. Protect myself financially and legally. Plan the confrontation on my terms. And ultimately, ensure consequences so severe that neither Laura nor her lover would get away unscathed. When she finally crawled into bed and whispered good night, I murmured it back, not trusting myself to say more. In the darkness, as far apart as two people could be on a queen mattress, she fell asleep quickly, her breaths becoming slow and steady. I lay awake staring at the ceiling for a long time. There was a time I'd listen to her sleeping and feel comfort, love. Now, every soft breath felt like an insult, a reminder of how oblivious she thought I was. The note in my nightstand was only the beginning. The truth was coming to light piece by piece. I was wide awake and ready now, ready to pull every last skeleton out of the closet and make her face them. In the silent hush of our home, I made another vow to myself. I would not confront her until I could do maximum damage, until I could ensure that this betrayal cost her and her precious Ryan everything. Beside me, Laura sighed lightly in her sleep, completely unaware of the storm about to come. Chapter 3. Shattered Illusions. 2 evenings later, I found myself sitting in my car on a quiet side street, a block away from Laura's office. It was just past 8:15 p.m. on Wednesday, and the dull glow of the streetlights overhead did little to cut through my nervous tension. I had taken the evening off from the restaurant under the pretense of a family emergency. In a way, that wasn't far from the truth. The implosion of my marriage certainly felt like an emergency to me. From my vantage point, I could see the front door of the small professional building where Laura rented a suite. Most of the other offices, a dentist, an accountant, a real estate agency, had long since gone dark by this hour. Only one window on the second floor still showed light, Laura's. She had told me over breakfast that morning that she'd likely be home late again, citing another client in crisis. She didn't name who, but I already knew. Her planner indicated Ryan had a session scheduled for 7 p.m. Wednesday. If the pattern held, she'd run over time with him. The thought made my stomach twist with equal parts anger and anticipation. I had been parked here since 7:30, engine off, just watching. My heart was drumming a steady rhythm of dread. In the silence of the car, every minute felt heavy. I recalled how many times over the past months she must have been here alone with him while I assumed she was just being a diligent therapist. How many lies did it take to construct those evenings? A little past 8:30 p.m., I saw movement. The front door of that building opened, spilling light onto the stoop. I sat up, pulse quickening. Laura stepped out first, locking the door behind her. She wore a burgundy blouse and a charcoal skirt, her business casual outfit from earlier in the day. I recognized it because I'd watched her choose it that morning with no clue that it was meant to impress someone else. Right behind her, a man emerged, tall, lean, maybe late 30s. Even from down the block, the streetlight caught the golden blonde of his hair. He had a trimmed beard and was dressed casually in dark jeans and a black jacket. He hovered near her as she'd finished locking up, and when she turned to face him, I saw her smile. Not the polite professional smile she gives her clients. No, this was different. Warm, playful, intimate. I felt my grip tighten on my phone, which I'd instinctively raised, camera at the ready. I snapped a photo, the faint click of the shutter sound lost in the night air. They walked to the small parking lot adjacent to the building. I slid down in my seat as I watched them approach a blue sedan parked under a lamp. Laura's car, a white Civic, was a few spots over, but she headed with him to his car first. They were talking. I couldn't hear from this distance, but I saw her laugh softly at something he said. He moved closer, his hand lightly touching her back. My blood boiled. I forced myself to hold steady and lift the phone again, recording a video this time. Through the zoomed-in screen, I saw him brush a strand of hair from her face in a gesture far too intimate for a mere client. She tilted her head up toward him and my heart seized, knowing what was coming. He leaned down and kissed her. My wife was kissing another man right there in the open. Even though I'd steeled myself for confirmation, the sight was like a knife to the gut. My hand shook, jostling the framing of the video. I gritted my teeth and kept filming as best I could, capturing them locked together for what felt like an eternity but was likely only a few seconds. They parted, and I zoomed in enough to catch Laura's expression. She looked happy. God, she looked radiant, in a way I hadn't seen in a long time, certainly not around me. The realization hit me like a wave. She truly had feelings for this man, not just a casual fling. The way she gazed at him, eyes shining in the dim light. It was the look she used to give me years ago. The betrayal sank deeper. It wasn't a drunken one-night stand or a mistake. This was an ongoing romance. A second life she'd have been living under my nose. I swallowed down a surge of bile. My chest hurt, a physical ache, as if my ribs were caving in. Focus, I told myself. Document this. They talked a bit more. He opened the driver's door of his sedan and she handed him something. Maybe a small bag or container? He placed it in his car. Then he closed the gap between them again and this time pulled her into a hug. her face pressed against his shoulder, his arms wrapping around her waist. I snapped several still photos, the two silhouettes embracing under the streetlight, unmistakable even from a distance, even if their features were a bit grainy on my phone camera. It would be enough. Finally, he pulled away and said something. Laura nodded, then stood on her toes and gave him one more quick peck on the lips. They parted with reluctance. He got into his car. Laura lingered, watching him start the engine. As the blue sedan pulled out of the lot and drove off, she had a dreamy smile on her face that made my stomach churn. She practically floated to her own car and got in. A minute later, her headlights came on. I slumped down further in my seat as she drove right past me on the street, heading home, back to me, as if nothing were amiss. I didn't start my car immediately. I sat there in the now empty street, hands clenched around the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing. I had just watched my wife of 7 years kiss another man. The shock was turning into something else now. A dark, smoldering rage mixed with heartbreak. But beneath those, I also felt a grim vindication. There it was, cold, hard proof. I wasn't crazy, my instincts had been right. A part of me, some hopeful, naive part, had wanted to find nothing, to be proven wrong, to have her simply working late like she said. That part was now obliterated. I exhaled a shaky breath and reviewed the photos on my phone. They were a little grainy, but clear enough. Laura, in her distinctive burgundy blouse, locked in the arms of the blonde man, their lips pressed together. Her face visible in one, his in another. Enough to recognize both of them if you knew them. And I knew them now. Ryan. This must be Ryan. I saved the video as well, though in the low light it was mostly useful for audio. Muffled though it was, I could faintly hear her laughter, and if I turned the volume up, maybe even their voices. It was more than enough evidence for a divorce attorney, and possibly for the state licensing board as well. An icy smile formed on my face at that thought. Laura had more than just our marriage to lose. Her entire career would go up in flames if this affair with a client was exposed. I started the engine finally and pulled away, driving on autopilot while my mind churned through the implications. I needed a plan. No, the plan was already forming, piece by piece, since the moment I found that note. Now it solidified. Step 1 had been gathering proof. Done. Step 2 would be securing legal counsel. I had researched a couple of top divorce attorneys in the area the night before and had one in mind. A colleague at the restaurant had gone through a nasty divorce last year and mentioned a bulldog lawyer named Rebecca Cole in Hartford, who didn't take kindly to cheating spouses, especially when it came to securing favorable terms for the wronged party. I glanced at the clock on the dash. 8:50 p.m. Too late to call tonight, but first thing tomorrow, I would be ringing up Ms. Cole's office to set a consultation. Then there was the matter of not tipping off Laura in the meantime. So far, I'd played it cool, but after what I just saw, it would be even harder to mask my feelings. I would have to, though. I had to continue as the clueless, trusting husband a little longer, at least until the critical pieces were in place. On the drive home, I rehearsed my demeanor for when I walked through the door. A bit tired from working emergency coverage at the restaurant, the excuse I'd given for taking off, looking forward to some sleep. Nothing out of the ordinary. When I pulled into our driveway, I noticed Laura's car already there. Of course, it had only been about 10 minutes since she left her office. I took a deep breath and went inside. She was in the kitchen heating up leftovers from the dinner I'd made on Monday. The same marinara sauce and pasta, now 2 days old, which neither of us had particularly wanted in the tension of that night. She looked up and smiled as I entered, like her heart wasn't betraying one love for another. The sheer audacity of her normalcy almost made me clench my fists. "Hey, you're home a bit early," she said, stirring the container in the microwave. "Yeah," I replied, keeping my voice as even as I could. "Crisis at work wasn't as bad as I thought. Got things sorted out quickly. That's good." She shut the microwave door and came over to give me a hello peck on the lips. I forced myself not to stiffen or pull away. Instead, I kissed her back lightly, hoping she couldn't feel the anger behind my kiss. She smelled of her light perfume still, but I wondered if I could detect any hint of him. His cologne, his sweat, on her. Paranoia or perhaps sharp intuition made me think I caught a whiff of something musky that wasn't hers. It took all my willpower not to recoil. "How was your evening?" I asked, hanging my jacket casually as if everything was fine. She shrugged, going back to her leftovers. It was all right. The client I mentioned on Monday, he's still having a rough time with his breakup. We did some heavy work tonight. I'm emotionally exhausted, to be honest. She gave a tired smile, ready to just eat and crash. I bet you are, I thought, suppressing a sneer. Out loud, I said, sure, sounds like a plan. I already ate at work, but I'll sit with you while you eat if you want. That'd be nice, she said, setting the reheated pasta on a plate. I sat across from her at the table as she ate, making mild small talk about mundane things. I mentioned an invented anecdote about a bartender's blender mishap. She chuckled appreciatively. She talked about maybe taking a weekend off soon for us to relax together, an idea that might have thrilled me before, but now felt like a farce. Perhaps guilt was motivating her to suggest it. All the while, a tempest brewed inside me. Part of me wanted to lash out. How can you sit there and lie to my face? How was Ryan's kiss? Did he taste of marinara too, or is that just me? Dark, bitter questions I had to swallow down along with my fake smiles. Eventually, we both went through the motions of getting ready for bed. She fell asleep quickly again, clearly drained from her emotional work. Meanwhile, I lay awake for the second night in a row, mind racing with what I needed to do. Tomorrow was action day. I'd get a lawyer, figure out financials, and maybe even put a private investigator on standby if needed for further documentation. Though honestly, I already had plenty. The note, the planner photos, the pictures, and video from tonight. But more evidence can't hurt, especially to prove the timeline and extent of the affair. I also had to consider what I wanted out of this divorce. My initial gut feeling was simply, I want her to have nothing. If I could, I'd leave her penniless, career in shambles, reputation ruined. It's a vindictive thought, one that surprises me a bit. I never considered myself a cruel man, but betrayal can forge cruelty from thin air, especially when the wound is fresh. Practically, I wanted to ensure I didn't end up on the hook for alimony. We both earned decent money, but her practice could earn more than my chef's salary in a good year. However, if her career blew up, maybe not. Still, I wanted to protect my assets, our house, everything. We didn't have kids. Thank God for that small mercy, I thought. That simplified some parts of divorce. At least I wouldn't have to fight for custody or worry about the emotional impact on a child. It was just between us. Well, and her lover, indirectly. As I stared into the darkness, I also contemplated the professional angle. If I reported her affair to the psychology licensing board, an investigation would surely follow. She could lose her license for sleeping with a patient. That would devastate her. She loves her work, or at least she used to. Would I do it? To ruin her career completely? I thought of the note again, of the image of them kissing, of all the lies. Yes, I would. She hadn't just betrayed me, she'd violated a fundamental trust of her profession. Perhaps she deserved to be exposed for that alone. Who knows if this Ryan was truly a vulnerable patient who she took advantage of, or if it was mutual. Either way, it was unforgivable professionally. The only complication was the affair would have to become public to do that. I'd essentially be launching a grenade that would blow up not just her life, but also fling shrapnel into mine. People in our social circle or family might find out the ugly details. It could be messy. But the alternative was letting her off easy, quietly divorcing and moving on, while she might run off with her lover and still keep her career. I clenched my jaw in the dark. No, easy wasn't in the cards. She chose to betray me in the worst way. She doesn't get easy. If I was going to do this, I'd do it thoroughly. I rolled over and finally closed my eyes, feeling the weight of what was to come pressing on me. Tomorrow, I'd begin the process officially. There would be no turning back after that. And honestly, I didn't want to turn back. The naive, hopeful husband in me was dead. In his place was someone colder, someone calculating, someone who would burn it all down if he had to, just to ensure the people who hurt him felt the scorch of the flames. Chapter 4. Laying the Groundwork. Morning light found me bleary-eyed but resolute. After just a few hours of fitful sleep, I rose quietly, careful not to wake Laura. I left her still bundled under the covers, her face calm and innocent in sleep, so deceitfully innocent. It struck me how appearances can lie. I used to look at that peaceful face and feel love. Now it just fueled my resolve. I brewed a pot of coffee in the kitchen, each clink of the mug and pour of liquid feeling surreal, as if I were on autopilot. Today was the day I truly began pushing over the dominoes. At 8:30 on the dot, I stepped out onto our back patio, phone in hand, and dialed the law offices of Rebecca Cole. My heart thudded as I introduced myself to the receptionist and asked for an urgent consultation. Perhaps I had expected some delay, but whether it was my tone or sheer luck, I was told Ms. Cole could see me at 11 a.m. I confirmed the appointment and hung up, exhaling slowly. Step 2. In motion. I came back inside to find Laura awake, dressed in a robe and pouring herself coffee. She looked up, a hint of concern on her face. "You're up early. Everything okay?" "Yeah," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Couldn't sleep much. Figured I'd get an early start at work. Inventory stuff to handle." She nodded, sleepiness in her eyes. "Oh, all right. You going in soon?" "In a bit. I might swing by the bank first." That part wasn't even a lie. I had plans to visit our bank that morning, too. She took a sip from her mug, leaning against the counter. There was a brief silence, her eyes searching mine. I wondered if she could sense the shift in me. I tried to appear a little weary, but normal. "Rough night?" she asked softly. "You seem tired." I forced a half smile. Just couldn't turn my brain off. "Restaurant issues. I'll be fine." She set her mug down and surprised me by wrapping her arms around me in a gentle hug. "Don't overwork yourself, Mark," she murmured. I stiffened for a fraction of a second before willing myself to relax into her embrace. Her warmth against me felt almost jarring. How dare she offer comfort like a loving wife when she was the cause of my turmoil? I patted her back lightly. "I'll try not to." She released me and offered a sympathetic smile. "Maybe tonight we can just relax together, open a bottle of wine. It feels like we've both been stressed this week." The sheer irony nearly made me laugh, stressed indeed. But her suggestion of quality time, was that guilt speaking? Or was she trying to cover her tracks by playing the attentive spouse? Either way, the gall of it turned my stomach. "Sure," I lied smoothly. "That sounds nice." We chatted briefly about mundane things, her schedule for the day, my supposed tasks. I told her I'd likely be home a bit late due to inventory count. Another lie to give me cover for whatever I needed to do in the afternoon. She accepted it without question, even making a joke about me pilfering an extra bottle of truffle oil for her from the supply room. I chuckled along, every ha-ha an effort. By 9:15, I was out the door with a folder of collected documents tucked in my laptop bag. Inside were printouts I'd quietly made earlier that morning. Copies of our bank statements, retirement accounts, mortgage info, basically a snapshot of our financial life. If divorce was coming, I wanted ammunition and knowledge. My first stop was the bank. I had two goals: open a separate individual account in my name only, and discreetly move a portion of our joint savings into it. I didn't plan to drain the accounts. That could look bad in divorce proceedings if noticed. But I wanted a safety net out of her immediate reach, just in case she tried anything like clearing accounts when she got wind of the divorce. The bank teller helped me set up a new checking and savings quickly. I transferred a modest sum, about $10,000, from our joint savings to my new individual savings. It was about a third of what was in there, not enough to be glaringly obvious if she casually looked. She rarely did. I handled most of the bills. The rest I left for now. I also checked our credit card transactions via the banking app while I was waiting. I'd been too distracted the past couple days to comb through them, but now I looked for any signs of her affair. It didn't take long. A charge from a fancy downtown hotel on the weekend I was away in Boston. She hadn't mentioned a hotel stay. Presumably, that was for a rendezvous with Ryan. There were also a couple of expensive restaurant charges on nights I remembered she claimed to be out with a girlfriend from college. Little lies funded by our money. I gritted my teeth but filed that information away. If needed, I could cite dissipation of marital assets on an affair. Another bargaining chip. By 10:45, I arrived at the law office. It was in a sleek high-rise downtown. The receptionist led me to a conference room where a few minutes later, Rebecca Cole walked in. She was a sharp-faced woman in her 50s with steely gray hair cut in a blunt bob. Her handshake was firm, and she got straight to business as we sat. "So, Mark, you mentioned on the phone it's a cheating spouse situation," she said, adjusting her glasses and pulling out a legal pad. "Why don't you give me a brief overview?" I took a deep breath. There was something oddly therapeutic about laying it all out to a stranger, especially one on my side. I told her everything in a measured tone, finding the note, the evidence of the affair with a man named Ryan, the fact that he was one of my wife's therapy clients, the photos and video I'd taken last night. I even mentioned her planner notes about bringing him to our home, which made Rebecca raise an eyebrow. I showed her a couple of the pictures on my phone, including the kiss photo. Rebecca nodded, taking notes briskly. When I finished, she looked up. Well, you certainly haven't wasted time gathering evidence. That's good. Her pen tapped the pad. Connecticut is an equitable distribution state and allows fault to be considered. Adultery can potentially influence alimony or division of assets, though it's not a guarantee. But with this level of egregious behavior, especially the fact she risked her professional license, it could give us leverage. I liked that word. Leverage. I don't want her getting a dime more than she deserves, I said, trying to keep bitterness out of my voice. Honestly, I'd like to come out with as much as possible. The house, at least. And I'd rather not pay alimony. She makes roughly what you do, Rebecca inquired. Some years more, some years a bit less. We're actually fairly close in income, but if she loses her license, that could change. Rebecca gave a thin smile. We won't count chickens before they hatch, but yes, if her earning potential drops due to consequences of her affair, that ironically might weaken her claim for alimony from you, since you could argue she caused her own loss. It's complicated, though. Judges vary. She flipped to a fresh page. Now, any kids? No, I said, relief evident in my tone. No children. She nodded. That simplifies matters. So primarily we're looking at division of assets and possibly alimony. If you two have similar incomes and no kids, normally it might be a straightforward split of assets and no or minimal alimony, but adultery could sway things. Some judges might deny her any alimony on principle if we present compelling evidence of her misconduct. And if she did spend joint funds on her affair, hotels, gifts, that's dissipation, which we can factor in. You mentioned some hotel charge? Yes, I confirmed. I have credit card records here. I handed over the folder and pointed out the highlighted charges that looked suspicious. This one at the Lafayette Hotel for $380. I was out of town that night. And a couple of restaurant bills that fit times. She said she was elsewhere. Rebecca pursed her lips. Good, good. It helps establish a timeline and pattern of infidelity-related expenditures. Then she leaned forward slightly. Now, there's another angle. Her professional misconduct. It's not directly a factor for divorce proceedings, but it is quite a bombshell. The fact that her lover is a current patient is, well, that's career suicide if it gets out. Are you planning to report it? I met her gaze. I am. I want to. But I'm willing to use it strategically. Her eyebrows arched. She clearly appreciated that I was thinking about leverage, not just vengeance, even though in truth it was both. Strategically, we could keep that in our back pocket. Essentially, if we approach her or her attorney with a strong settlement offer favoring you, we can imply that if she doesn't accept, things could get messy and very public. We won't say it in so many words, no outright extortion on record, but they'll know what we mean. Most rational actors would choose to protect their career and reputation over fighting for a bit more money or assets. I nodded. That makes sense. She might agree to almost anything to keep this quiet. Exactly. However, you have to be prepared that once we go down this road, she could get nasty too. Sometimes cheating spouses, when cornered, try to turn the tables. Maybe claim you were abusive or some nonsense to distract from their own wrongdoing. The thought had crossed my mind in nightmares, that she might fabricate some story to flip the script. She's never hinted at doing that. I've never laid a hand on her, never even yelled much. But I wouldn't put it past her to lie if desperate. If she does, we'll be ready. Do you have any evidence to counter potential false claims? For instance, any journal, recordings, anything that shows the true nature of your relationship? I thought about it. Not specifically. Our life was never one where I thought to record anything. Not really, aside from character witnesses maybe. But I doubt it'll go that way. She's very concerned about her image. I think she'll try to keep things quiet, not make them louder. Let's hope. Now, how do you want to initiate this? We can either serve her the papers without warning, or we can have a sit-down first. Sometimes that's advised if the spouse is likely to react extremely. But given the circumstances, surprise might be on our side. I didn't even have to think about that. I wanted to hit her from nowhere. Just like the note had blindsided me, I left unsaid. Rebecca allowed herself a tiny approving smirk. All right. We'll draft the complaint for divorce, citing adultery. We'll request an unequal distribution in your favor, citing financial misconduct and no alimony due to her marital fault. We'll also list the specific instances of spending on the affair that you provided. Hearing the formal terms and that this was really happening made my heart pound. I was doing this. We continued discussing details for a bit. She asked about any valuable possessions, the state of our mortgage, etc., to incorporate all angles. Thankfully, we didn't have a complicated portfolio. Just the house, 2 cars, some savings/retirement. No shared business or anything. As we wrapped up, Rebecca said, "It'll take a few days to draft everything properly and file. Once filed, we can serve her immediately." "How do you want her served? At home, at work?" I considered. Serving at her office might shock her in front of strangers, but it could also potentially tip off colleagues about trouble, something she'd hate. At home would be more private, but less humiliating. I found I wanted her to squirm a bit. "If possible, I'd like her served at her office," I said slowly. "But I'd need to time it when no patients are around. Maybe early morning or midday when she's free. I don't want to traumatize any innocent client who might be sitting in the waiting room." I still had some decency, unlike her. Rebecca nodded. "We can arrange the process server to go at a specified time. You'll have to give us her typical schedule or when she might be available." "I'll figure out a window and let you know," I agreed. She gathered her papers and stood. "One more thing. If you have access to any evidence of the affair, like those pictures or the note, make sure to keep copies somewhere safe, outside of the house. Perhaps email them to me, or store on a cloud drive she can't access." "I will. I've been careful at home. She hasn't seen anything. Everything's on my phone or hidden." "Good. And you should consider changing your passwords if you shared any, or any digital access she might have to your accounts, just as a precaution." I made a mental note of that as well. Laura did know one of my simpler passwords that I used for Netflix and such. I'd be sure to change things like email or banking if they overlapped. We shook hands. "I'll get to work on the paperwork, Mark. You'll hear from me soon to review the draft and then we'll proceed with filing." "Thank you, Rebecca," I said sincerely. Her efficiency and cold clarity gave me confidence. She was exactly the kind of ally I needed. Walking out of that office building, I felt a grim satisfaction. The legal machinery was moving. In a matter of days, Laura would be served divorce papers citing adultery. The thought of her reading those words, of seeing the evidence laid out, gave me a dark thrill. She deserved to face the ugliness she brought into our lives. But I wasn't done for the day. As I sat in my car, another item on my agenda glared in my mind. Ryan. I hadn't yet decided how to deal with him directly, but after last night's visuals and everything he'd done with my wife, I felt a burning need to confront the man personally. Not just out of anger, though there was plenty of that, but also because he might be useful. Useful in securing even more evidence or leverage, or even just to rattle them both. While I had him on video and photos, part of me wanted a direct confirmation or confession from him, too. If I could get him to admit the affair, maybe even in writing or recording, it would be an ironclad piece for the board complaint. Alternatively, I might coerce him into cooperating, perhaps convincing him to end things with her, to leave her high and dry once the divorce went through. That would break her heart and be a fitting emotional punishment. Yes, a talk with Mr. E. Ryan was in order, and I had a pretty good idea where to find him outside of their secret meetings. From my snooping, I knew his full name now. Ryan Mitchell, thanks to her scheduling notes that had once or twice spelled it out. A quick search told me he was the executive chef at a restaurant called the Copper Pot. That was perfect. I knew where to find him and roughly when. Either way, I decided that later today I'd pay a visit to the Copper Pot. If he was executive chef, he might be there prepping in the afternoon before the dinner service. I could catch him either coming in or stepping out for a break. He wouldn't know me by sight, and that gave me an advantage to approach without alert. I checked the time, just after noon. Plenty of time to have this out before I needed to feign going home from work. As I started the car and pulled onto the road, I felt a steely calm wash over me. Everything was lining up. Evidence, legal action, and soon, a face-to-face with the other man. This wasn't just a spontaneous flail at revenge anymore. It was a calculated campaign, and I was fully committed to seeing it through no matter how much of my soul I had to harden in the process. Chapter 5. The Other Man. That afternoon, I drove across town to the Copper Pot feeling a taut coil of anger and anticipation twisting inside me. The restaurant was a modern, upscale place on a trendy street, all polished wood and floor-to-ceiling windows. They didn't open for dinner until 5:30, but I guess the kitchen crew would be prepping well before then. I parked nearby and walked around to the alley that likely led to the kitchen's service entrance. Sure enough, I saw a couple of staff in white aprons smoking by a back door taking a break. I kept my distance, loitering by a bakery's delivery van and peering down the alley. One of the smokers, a young guy, glanced at me curiously. I realized I probably looked suspicious hanging around. Taking a breath, I approached them with a friendly air. "Hey, sorry, I'm looking for Chef Ryan Mitchell. Is he in yet?" I asked casually. The young guy took a drag and sized me up. "Yeah, Chef's inside. Should be prepping on the line. You a friend?" "Old friend from out of town," I lied smoothly. "Thought I'd surprise him. But I don't want to barge into the kitchen if he's busy. Think you could let him know Mark is here asking for him? It'll only take a minute." The two exchanged a glance, and the other, an older man with a dish towel slung over his shoulder, shrugged. "I'll get him. Just wait here." He disappeared through the back door. My heart started to thump harder. I hadn't fully decided what I would do or say, but I had outlines of a plan. I slipped my phone into my jacket pocket and tapped the record button on a voice memo app, just in case I could capture him saying something useful. A minute later, the door swung open again, and out stepped Ryan Mitchell in his chef's coat. He looked a bit perplexed, wiping his hands on a towel. In daylight, I got a clearer look than the night before. Early to mid-30s, athletic build, fashionable stubble along his jaw. He had that harried, intense energy I recognized in many chefs, like he was always in 10 places at once mentally. He approached with a polite but puzzled smile. "Hi, I'm Ryan. You were looking for me?" I stepped forward out of the alley, shadows, and removed my sunglasses. "Yes, we need to talk." Maybe it was the tone of my voice or something in my expression, but I saw his posture shift, ever so slightly tensing, as if some instinct told him this wasn't a friendly reunion. "Do I know you?" he asked cautiously. "You know of me," I said, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. "We haven't met. I'm Mark Barlow, Laura's husband." I watched as a realization dawned in his eyes. The color drained from his face, going a shade paler. His mouth opened, but no words came out for a second. He glanced toward the street as if looking for an escape or maybe checking who might overhear. The other kitchen staff had politely withdrawn back inside, leaving us alone in the alley. "All right," he said quietly, recovering a bit. I guess we do need to talk." I crossed my arms, feeling the anger rising even as I struggled to appear controlled. "You think? You have some nerve meeting me like this. But I wasn't going to let you slink around without consequences." He rubbed a hand on the back of his neck, eyes down. "Look, Mark, you don't get to look Mark me," I snapped, voice low and harsh. "Just shut up and listen for a minute." His jaw tightened at that, but he nodded, face wary. I took a step closer, lowering my tone. "I know everything. I found out a few days ago. And last night I saw you with her at her office. I have photos, videos, you and my wife." I spat the word wife like it was poison. He winced, looking genuinely pained. "I never meant for it to go that far. We didn't plan—" "Sorry?" I gave a short, humorless laugh. "You're sorry? For screwing another man's wife, your own therapist at that? That's one hell of a sorry." At the mention of therapist, he grimaced. He had the decency to look ashamed. "I never meant to hurt anyone, okay? I'm not here to defend what we did. I care about her a lot. And I'm sorry that people got hurt." "People? You mean me. I'm the one who got hurt. You and her sure seemed just fine last night." My temper flared, and I took another step, now just a foot from him. I could see him tense, but he held his ground. "She's not fine," he said quietly. "She's been a mess about this. She never wanted to hurt you. She was just unhappy, and—" "Do not try to justify it," I growled. "You think she was unhappy? So that gives you both license to betray me, to break vows, to break ethical laws? You were her damn patient. How screwed up is that, Ryan? He flinched at the word patient. I pressed on. You realize she could lose everything if that gets out? Her license, her career. Did she mention that risk to you? His eyes flickered. Of course she did. He swallowed. She said it was a risk worth taking for us to be together. I shook my head in disbelief. What a fantasy land they lived in. Well, that little fantasy is about to crash headlong into reality. I've already met with a divorce lawyer. By next week, she'll be served. Adultery, misconduct, everything on the table. He blew out a breath, looking down. I figured this was coming. She kind of hinted she felt you pulling away this week. Maybe she suspected you knew something. I maintained a hard stare. Good. Let her worry. But that's not the only thing. I'm also going to file a complaint with the state licensing board. They'll investigate her for an ethics violation. It won't be hard to prove with all the evidence I have. And with your cooperation. I let that last part hang pointedly. He looked up sharply. My cooperation? Yes, they'll likely call you to testify or give a statement, as the client involved. You should consider what you'll say. If you try to cover for her, lie that nothing happened, well, I spread my hands. I have plenty to contradict that. Don't perjure yourself for her, Ryan. It's not worth it. He paled further. Jesus, you're really going to go that far? Ruin her career? I bared my teeth in something like a snarl. I intend to make sure there are consequences. You both made choices. Now you both pay for them. He ran a hand through his hair, agitation showing. Look, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But the board, that could destroy her. She's a good therapist. She helps people. Spare me. I cut him off. She wasn't being a good therapist when she blurred every line with you. And I frankly don't care how it affects her at this point. Did she care about destroying our marriage? No. Actions have consequences. He looked at me with a mix of pleading and anger. I love her, okay? I'm in love with Laura. This isn't just some fling for me. It was strange, but hearing him say that didn't sting as much as I'd have expected. Perhaps I'd already assumed as much from seeing them. Instead, it hardened my resolve. If you love her, then maybe you should have thought about what dragging her into an affair could do to her life, I said coldly. But you didn't. So here we are. He stepped closer, an earnest desperation in his face. If you ever loved her, maybe you could just divorce quietly. Let her keep her professional dignity. We'll go away, I'll take care of her. There's no need to destroy her. I felt an almost dizzying rush of fury at his audacity to ask me for mercy on her behalf. I almost wanted to laugh that he assumed he'd just step into my place playing savior. My voice dropped to an icy whisper. You really think I owe either of you a damn thing? You waltz in and help wreck my life, and now you want me to walk away amicably so you two can be happy ever after? Not a chance in hell. He squared his shoulders slightly, a flare of frustration in his eyes. I'm trying to appeal to your decency. I get that you hate me, and probably hate her right now. But you're not a monster. Don't punish her beyond what's necessary. The marriage will be over. Can't that be enough? I gave him a withering stare. Decency? That concept felt almost foreign in this context. Perhaps I wasn't a monster by nature, but their actions had certainly awakened something monstrous in me. Instead of arguing further, I turned to a colder tactic. Here's what's going to happen, Ryan. You're going to have a chance to save your own skin, if not hers. When this blows up, you're going to be implicated too. Publicly, at least. Your name will come out as the guy who slept with a married woman. Possibly that you were emotionally unstable enough to get seduced by your therapist. Not a great look, right? He grimaced, and I could see that notion landed. He hadn't fully considered the humiliation he might face once this story wasn't confined to our triangle. I pressed on. But if you cooperate, if you help make the case ironclad, maybe even be the one to preemptively report the relationship to the board yourself, then you position yourself as a victim in this. You could claim she violated your trust, that you were in a vulnerable state and she took advantage, whatever. The narrative could favor you. She'll still lose her license, but you might come out looking like, I don't know, a poor soul who got manipulated. He looked conflicted, mouth opening then closing. You want me to throw her under the bus completely, he said in a hushed tone. I want you to consider your own future, I replied. Because I guarantee I'm considering mine, and hers is not going to be a part of it. If you truly love her, you might find this hard. But think about it. She's done as a therapist regardless if I report it. Even if she somehow keeps her license, you think she can keep seeing clients? Her reputation will be shot. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. And when it does, what then? You gonna support her unemployed ass on a chef's salary? You think resentment won't grow? He glared at me. Don't talk like that. We'll manage. I'm not some line cook. I do well enough. We talked about maybe relocating, starting fresh somewhere after things settle. I sneered. Fairy tales. Let me paint a real picture. She might lose the house if I get it in the divorce. She'll be dragged through mud in court. Her friends, her family, they'll learn what she did. You two will be infamous, at least in our circles. Think her family will welcome you with open arms as the guy who helped ruin her marriage and career? Doubt it. That kind of pressure breaks most relationships built on affairs. Statistically, they don't last, you know. He bristled, but a shadow of doubt crossed his face. Cheaters often believe their love is special, but reality is harsh when exposed to daylight. I went for the final push. So you have a choice, Ryan. Stick by her and go down together in flames because I will scorch the earth around both of you. Or cut your losses, cooperate with me on the professional complaint, and maybe quietly disappear from this whole mess with only minor burns. The alley was silent except for the distant hum of city traffic. Ryan looked truly shaken now. He leaned against the brick wall, processing. I could almost see the war between his heart and his sense of self-preservation. I need time to think, he said at last, voice strained. I nodded, surprisingly feeling a sliver of pity for the guy. He looked how I felt a few days ago, world upside down. There isn't much time. I'll be filing within a week. If you're going to make a statement or your own report, do it before then. Otherwise, once the official wheels start turning, you'll just be another target of inquiry. He rubbed his face. God, she'll never forgive me if I do that to her. His loyalty to her was almost admirable in a pathetic way. I stepped back, feeling a bit more in control. Maybe not, but she's already lost you your integrity. Don't let her take your future too. She wasn't thinking of you when she initiated all this, risking your reputation as well as hers. He looked at me sharply. It wasn't like that. I kissed her first. She tried to maintain boundaries initially, but I pushed. She'll say it was her fault because she was the professional, but I knew what I was doing too. Interesting. He was taking some responsibility. But that wouldn't change the outcome. Fine, then you're both guilty. If you feel noble about it, go down with the ship. But something tells me when reality hits, job lost, money gone, maybe even legal consequences, you might not feel so noble. He fell silent, eyes fixed on a crack in the asphalt. We stood there for a few loaded seconds. Finally, I spoke more quietly. I'm done here. I've said what I came to say. I pulled out a small card I had prepared that morning with a burner email I'd set up. If you decide to cooperate, send any statement or evidence to this email. Or if you need to reach me, it's anonymous enough. I suggest you think hard about it. He took the card loosely, not really looking at it. Mark, he said as I turned to go. I paused. For what it's worth, I really am sorry. I never wanted... He stopped himself, perhaps realizing more words were useless. I didn't respond. I just gave him one last long look. In that moment, I saw not a formidable enemy, but a deeply flawed man who'd been swept up in something beyond his depth. A foolish man, perhaps truly in love, but now scared of the impending fallout. Without another word, I walked away, leaving him slumped against the wall in that alley, a chef far out of his kitchen with far too much to chew on. As I rounded the corner and headed to my car, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My hands were trembling slightly. The confrontation had taken a lot out of me, but I felt a grim sense of accomplishment. I had faced the other man, looked him in the eye, and delivered my terms. Whether he'd actually carry out what I suggested, I wasn't sure. But at minimum, I planted fear and doubt in his mind. That alone might lead to cracks between him and Laura. Perhaps he'd pressure her to drop everything and run away now. Or perhaps he'd withdraw to save himself. Either outcome benefited me. One thing was certain. My Scorched Earth campaign was now truly underway. There was no reversing course. And as I started my engine and drove off, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The hardest confrontations were done. Now, it was just a matter of time and execution. Chapter 6. Confrontation. The next few days passed in a tense, surreal limbo. At home, I continued to play the part of the slightly tired but otherwise normal husband, while inside I counted down the hours. My lawyer had drafted the divorce papers and filed the complaint by Friday. Arrangements were made to have Laura served at her office on Monday midday, when she typically had a break between clients. It was excruciating to be around her that weekend, knowing what was coming. She, perhaps sensing some undercurrent, made several attempts to spend quality time, suggesting we go out to dinner or watch a movie together. I obliged with superficial smiles and minimal conversation, my mind elsewhere. If she noticed my distance, she chalked it up to the same stress excuse I'd been feeding her. Sunday night, she actually initiated intimacy, as the first time in a couple weeks. I was caught off guard by that. Perhaps guilt or fear spurred her to seek comfort, or maybe an attempt to feel normal. I had to gently deflect her advances, pretending I had a headache. The look of concern and mild hurt on her face as she rolled over gnawed at me, confusing my emotions further. Even after all she'd done, a small part of me still hated seeing her in pain. But I reminded myself that whatever she felt now was nothing compared to what awaited. Monday came, gray and drizzly. I went into work as usual in the morning, but my mind was on 12 o'clock. I knew the process server was likely intercepting her around then. I imagined the scene. A stranger walking into her office waiting area, asking, "Are you Dr. Laura Barlow?" and then handing her an envelope when she affirmed with a curt, "You've been served." Perhaps he might even say it loud enough for any nearby colleague to hear. The thought gave me a dark satisfaction. At 12:30, I slipped out to the alley behind the restaurant and called Rebecca to confirm. "It's done," she said simply. "She was served about 15 minutes ago. I've already received an email that the documents were handed to her in person." Do we know how she reacted? I couldn't help asking, picturing it. The lawyer gave a slight chuckle. "Process servers don't typically stick around to describe the scene, Mark. I'm sure she was surprised. You'll likely hear from her soon." "Right. Okay, thanks." I hung up, adrenaline coursing. I debated what to do next. Go home early? Wait for her to contact me? I expected an angry or frantic call any moment, but none came during the next hour. By 2 p.m., curiosity and a perverse concern got the better of me. I texted her, "Hey, how's your day going?" I figured if she was reeling, she might reply with something telling, but no immediate answer. I ended up leaving work a bit early, around 3, saying I had a personal emergency. My boss was understanding. I rarely cut out, so it must have seemed serious. On the drive home, I still hadn't heard from Laura. My stomach was in knots, wondering what was happening on her end. Did she go into shock? Anger? Was she calling a lawyer of her own? Or confronting Ryan? Part of me worried. Was she safe? She had emotional tendencies. I didn't want her doing something drastic. But no, likely she was processing or plotting next steps. Her car was in the driveway when I got home. It was only 3:30 earlier than she usually returned. She must have canceled her afternoon appointments. The moment of truth was at hand. I steeled myself and walked in through the front door. The house was quiet except for the faint sound of the washing machine in the laundry room. Odd, doing chores at a time like this? I found her in the living room, standing by the fireplace, arms wrapped around herself as she stared at the floor. She looked up when I entered, and I saw she was holding a thick envelope in one hand, cream-colored, the kind Rebecca's office used. Her face was pale, eyes red-rimmed like she'd been crying, but there was also a tightness in her expression, a mix of anguish and anger held in check. "Mark," she said, voice trembling slightly. I set my keys down slowly. "Hi, Laura." She swallowed. "I think you know what I want to ask." I nodded toward the envelope. "You've been served, I see." She grimaced. "So it's true. You filed for divorce." There was a heartbeat of silence. I realized I was shaking, a tremor in my hands that I tried to hide by tucking them in my pockets. This was it. Face to face with the woman I'd loved, ready to detonate everything. "I did," I answered quietly. Her eyes flared, hurt twisting her features. "Without even talking to me, you blindsided me at my office, Mark. What the hell?" Her voice rose, anger overtaking the tremble. I felt a spark of anger in return at her indignation. Funny being blindsided, isn't it? Almost like finding a note under your bed that turns your world upside down. I fired the words sharply. She blinked, confusion flashing across her face. What note? What are you talking about? I realized in her shock about the divorce, she hadn't connected the dots yet of how I found out. My jaw tightened. The note your lover left you that you carelessly let slip under our bed for me to find. Her eyes widened, lips parting. For a moment, genuine bewilderment. I never saw a note. Ryan left a note? I could tell by her reaction she hadn't known. Maybe she left him sleeping and he left it. It almost didn't matter now. Yes, that's how it started. Our robot vacuum fished out a little love note from under there last week. Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you. Until next time, R. I recited it from memory, each word like poison on my tongue. She had gone ashen. Oh my God, she whispered, covering her mouth. Whether from horror at being caught or regret, who knew? I pressed on. So I played dumb for a few days. I found your planner, Laura. I saw all the appointments with Ryan. I followed you last Wednesday. I watched you kiss him in the parking lot. I have photos. I have everything. Tears welled in her eyes now. Mark, Don't, I snapped, holding up a hand. Don't you dare try to explain it away. Not after I've seen it with my own eyes. Heard your lies with my own ears. She took a step forward. I'm not trying to explain it away. I want to talk, please. The tears spilled over, rolling down her cheeks, but her voice held steady. Talk? Now you want to talk? I gave a harsh laugh. Fine, let's talk. How long have you been sleeping with him? She winced. About 5 months. The confirmation, even though I knew, still punched me in the gut. 5 months of my life built on lies. Why? My voice cracked on the single syllable, despite my effort to sound cold. Why, Laura, what the hell were you thinking? He's your patient, and you're married to me. She wiped her cheeks with a shaky hand. I never meant to hurt you. I swear, I never set out to cheat. It just happened. Bullshit, I snarled. Affairs don't just happen. You crossed line after line, made choice after choice. She sobbed once, then caught herself. You have every right to be angry. I know I betrayed you. I've been hating myself for it, Mark. Every day. I shook my head, feeling a furious incredulity. If you hated yourself so much, why didn't you stop? Why didn't you tell me you were unhappy or ask for a divorce before jumping into bed with someone else? She looked down, guilt etched on her face. I was scared. I was confused. I did tell you in ways, but maybe not clearly enough. I tried to hint at how distant we'd become. I cut her off, voice rising. Don't you put this on me. Don't you dare insinuate this is my fault because I work too much, or whatever story you told him. Her eyes flashed. He told you that? I nodded curtly. Yes, I met with Ryan. We had a nice chat. Learned all about the lies you spun him. How our marriage was basically over and I didn't care about you and poor you, feeling neglected. She covered her face briefly. Oh God, I was venting. I never meant to what? Make him feel sorry for you so he'd justify screwing you? Congratulations, it worked. Her hands dropped and now anger flared through her tears. That's not how it was. I didn't sleep with him out of pity. I developed feelings. Real feelings. And yes, I lied to both of you. And to myself. I told myself our marriage had died because I couldn't face that I was destroying it. It was cowardly and wrong. Her voice cracked on the last word and she paused, inhaling shakily. Then, quietly, I'm sorry, Mark. I am so deeply sorry. You have to know that. I stood there, a storm inside me. Those words, I'm sorry, were ones I'd imagined her saying in some hopeful moments, thinking maybe she'd beg forgiveness. But hearing them didn't soften me as I once thought they might. Sorry isn't enough, I said, my tone cold and flat. It doesn't undo what you did. She nodded, tears still flowing. I know it doesn't. I can't believe you went straight to a divorce filing. You didn't even confront me first, give me a chance to lie some more, to gaslight me. Or maybe you'd have had time to hide money, cover tracks. No, I wasn't giving you any warnings. She looked wounded. Hide money? You think I'd stoop that low? I raised an eyebrow. You already stooped to cheating on me and risking your entire career. I don't know what else you'd do if cornered. She opened her mouth, then closed it, as if conceding the point. Instead, she stepped closer. Mark, please. Maybe we can handle this without blowing everything up. I'll give you the divorce if that's what you want. It's what's happening, I interjected. She flinched but continued. But we don't need to involve my job or make it ugly. We can split things fairly, quietly. We don't have to ruin each other's lives over this. A bitter smile twisted my mouth. Quietly? For you to save face, you mean? So you can run off with Ryan and pretend it was all above board later? She shook her head vehemently. No. I mean, yes, eventually We had hoped to be together, but not like this. I wasn't trying to trick you out of anything. I'll accept whatever terms for divorce. Just please, Mark, I'm begging you. Don't report me to the board. Don't destroy my career. Therapy is all I have. It's my passion, my identity. If I lose that, I have nothing. Her voice broke into a sob on nothing. She was outright pleading now. It was a sorry sight. My once confident, composed wife reduced to a desperate woman clutching at any mercy I might have. For a moment, I simply stared at her, listening to her weep. A year ago, even a month ago, I might have rushed to comfort any tears of hers. Now I felt this hollow distance as if her sorrow was happening to someone I barely knew. I gave you everything, I said softly, almost to myself. I trusted you. I supported your career, listened to your worries, loved you unconditionally. And you threw it back in my face. She took that like a blow, nodding through her tears. You did. You were good to me, Mark. That's why I feel so horrible. I was selfish and stupid and I ruined it. But if there's any part of you that ever loved me, please, don't ruin me completely. Hating me is one thing. Punishing me legally is one thing. I deserve it. But reporting me, making me a pariah in my field, I'd never come back from that. Her sobs grew, shoulders shaking as she covered her face with her hands. Something about the rawness of her anguish tugged at a deeply buried part of me. The part that remembered I once vowed to take care of this woman, to never see her hurt. For an instant, I felt a pang of pity. Could I do it? Could I spare her the worst of it? Let her keep her license in exchange for an easy divorce? Did I even want to give her that reprieve? I thought of the nights I lay awake tortured by visions of them together, the humiliation and heartbreak she dealt me. I thought of how meticulously she lied every day while I kissed her goodbye in the mornings. And I thought of Ryan's face when he realized she'd lied to him too. How even he looked betrayed by her in some ways. She had made her own bed of betrayal and deceit, and now she wept that it was on fire. I realized I had been silent a long moment. She peered up from behind her hands, eyes searching mine for a sign of mercy. I have a question, I said quietly. If I hadn't found out, how long would this have gone on? Would you have told me eventually? Or would you have just strung me along, making a fool of me indefinitely while you had your affair? She swallowed hard. I honestly don't know. I told myself I would find the right moment to tell you. I nearly did, a couple times, but I lost my nerve. I was so afraid of hurting you and I was a coward. And then I hoped maybe I could fix my mistake without imploding everything. But it was too late. My feelings for him. She stopped, seeing the flash of pain and anger in my face when she mentioned her feelings. I stepped closer now, feeling a surge of rage beneath my cool facade. Your feelings for him, I said, voice low. Are they so strong? Strong enough that you'd destroy our lives for him? She hesitated, tears still flowing. Then she nodded, miserably. I did fall in love with him. I didn't mean to. It just happened over time, working with him, helping him through his struggles. Lines blurred, and I know it was wrong, but yes, I love him. Hearing her say it outright was like a punch to the chest. I forced myself not to show it, but it took all my will. I see, I finally said coldly. Then you'll have no trouble being with him after all this, but let me tell you how that's going to look. She looked at me warily. I intend to make sure everyone knows what the two of you did. I've already spoken to a lawyer. The divorce cites adultery, with evidence. By the time I'm done, our friends will know why we split. Your family will know. His family, if he has any, will know. Your colleagues may catch wind if any of them saw you get served or once gossip spreads. This won't be a quiet, tidy, we grew apart divorce, Laura. It's going to be a scandal. That's on you. She paled again, but I continued, merciless. As for the board complaint, I said, locking eyes with her, I have not submitted it yet. A lie, I hadn't officially, though I was prepared to. But her eyes lit with a desperate hope at those words. If you cooperate fully in this divorce, no games, no demands, you walk away with only what I deem fair, then maybe I'll consider handling the licensing issue privately. It was phrased carefully, not quite a promise, but she seized on it, stepping closer and almost reaching for my arm before stopping herself. Yes, yes, I'll cooperate. Anything you want, Mark, I'll sign whatever. You can have the house, the savings, just please don't report me. I can't lose my practice. I regarded her silently. She was agreeing so quickly, so absolutely. If I had any lingering doubt that she cared about me more than her own skin, it evaporated. She wasn't fighting for us or even for him now. She was fighting for herself, her life. Love or not, survival instinct ruled. All right, I said. Here's what I need. You leave this house by the end of the week. Go stay with a friend or, hell, go to your lover's place if you want. I don't care. But I don't want to see you here. I'll keep the house. We'll split the bank accounts 50-50 as they are today. Nothing more complicated. No alimony either direction. We sell your car and split the equity, or you keep it and assume the remaining car loan, if any. And you will put in writing that you acknowledge your adultery and that you waive any claim to alimony, citing your misconduct as the reason. She nodded rapidly, absorbing the terms. They were harsh, but not entirely destituting her. Yes, all of that, I agree. I'll get a lawyer to review and we can make it official. You'll get whatever lawyer you want, I said. But know that if you try to alter these terms substantially, the deal's off, and I will unleash hell with the board and anyone else. She put a hand to her mouth, steadying her breath. I won't, I promise, I'll sign. I looked at her, this broken promise of a person I once thought I'd spend my life with. It was astonishing how quickly things could crumble. In the span of 1 week, we had gone from a normal married couple to two adversaries negotiating terms of surrender. She took a tentative step closer. Mark, I know I have no right to ask, but will you ever be able to forgive me? Not take me back, she added hurriedly. I know that's impossible now. I mean, just as a person. Or will you always hate me? I felt an emptiness at that question. Did I hate her? In that moment, I thought I did. But hate is such a live, ongoing emotion. What I felt was something colder. Indifference to her fate, maybe. And a deep, deep hurt that might never fully leave. I don't know, I said honestly. Right now, I can't stand the sight of you. Maybe one day I'll be numb enough that it doesn't matter. But forgive? I doubt it. You killed something in me, Laura. In us. And I can't imagine forgiving that. Fresh tears rolled down her face. I understand. Her voice was a cracked whisper. We stood there, a strange, sorrowful silence stretching between us. Two people mourning different things. She softly said, I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you like this. A part of me wanted to shout, but you did. Instead, I just nodded curtly. Want and consequences are different. These are the consequences. She sniffled, wiping her face. What about the board? Will you promise not to report me if I comply? Here was the moment of feigned mercy. I met her eyes and delivered the lie smoothly. If you do everything we discussed and finalize this divorce without trouble, I will not personally submit a complaint. I can't promise no one will, but I won't. Technically true, I could still let Ryan or someone else do it, or perhaps some rumor would find its way. But she seemed to accept it as reassurance. Thank you, she breathed, relief and grief mixing on her face. I don't deserve it, but thank you. I said nothing to that. The truth was I hadn't decided fully what I'd do about reporting her. Part of me still very much wanted that retribution. But I also recognized the leverage value. Keeping it as a sword over her head ensured her compliance. We discussed a few more logistics in terse, formal tones. She would pack essentials and stay with a girlfriend for now. I doubted that. More likely she'd run to Ryan, but she did not say it and I didn't care. We would inform friends and family with a vague story at first. We've decided to separate, or etc., to avoid immediate drama, though the real reasons would likely leak out later. It was almost eerie how quickly we shifted to practical matters once the emotional storm passed. She even got out a pad to scribble a checklist. Dividing the bank accounts, changing the utilities, etc. Her therapist brain slipping into organization mode as a coping mechanism, perhaps. I kept my responses short, businesslike. I could feel myself distancing internally, detaching from the reality that this sobbing woman was my wife. Now she was just an obstacle to get past. After we'd exhausted immediate topics, an awkward lull fell. She fiddled with her wedding ring. She had put it back on today, I noticed ironically. Perhaps to keep up appearances at work. Now it was just sadly out of place. Finally, I said, I think that covers it for now. I'll have my lawyer draw up an agreement reflecting what we said. She nodded. Okay. I turned to go upstairs, planning to retreat to the bedroom and let her start packing without me hovering. As I reached the hallway, I heard her soft voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry, Mark. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I am. I paused, hand on the banister. I didn't turn around. I know, I said, and it was the truth. I believed she was sorry. Sorry for herself, sorry for me, sorry for everything. But some things cannot be unsaid or undone. Then I went upstairs, leaving her standing there. In our bedroom, I closed the door and finally exhaled a long, shuddering breath. My eyes stung unexpectedly. I rubbed them and realized with mild surprise that I had actually shed a few tears at some point during that confrontation. I hadn't even felt them in the heat of the moment. I sat on the edge of the bed, our bed, where this all began with a damned note and let out a sound somewhere between a sob and a laugh. It was over. 7 years of marriage annihilated in one conversation. And it struck me that, for all my planning and righteous fury, this was horribly sad. I felt like I needed to mourn, but also that I wanted to scream or break something. A strange numbness was creeping in to contain all that. Just then, I heard the front door close. I got up and peered out the window in time to see Laura carrying 2 suitcases to her car in the drizzle. She wiped her eyes, then put on a pair of sunglasses, despite the cloudy day, as if to hide her red eyes from any watching neighbors. I watched dispassionately as she loaded up and then, after a long moment standing by the driver's side, perhaps summoning courage, she got in and drove off. I don't know if she looked up at the bedroom window as she left. I stepped back before I could find out. When her car was out of sight, I sank to the floor and let out a breath I felt I'd been holding for a year. It felt both agonizing and liberating. It was strange. I had won, in a sense. She conceded to my terms, slunk away in disgrace. I should have felt triumphant. And part of me did, but another part felt an immense loss. Not of her. That love was dead. But of the life I thought I had. The innocent trust, the unscarred heart. Those were gone, and I'd never get them back. I allowed myself a few minutes of wallowing in that dark place. Then I stood, wiped my face dry, and straightened my back. There was still work to do. Chapter 7. Aftermath. 3 months later, I stood in the nearly empty courtroom as the judge finalized our divorce. It was a perfunctory hearing. Laura didn't even show up, having agreed to everything beforehand. My terms held. I kept the house and most of our assets, and neither of us would pay alimony. Officially, we cited irreconcilable differences, but everyone in that room and beyond knew the truth behind those dry words. The scandal had not remained quiet. In our social circle, whispers spread quickly once I confided in a couple of close friends about the real reason for our split. Word got around that Dr. Barlow had run off the rails with a patient. Some friends were sympathetic to me. Others simply recoiled from the mess. Her reputation in town was shattered. Acquaintances who once respected her now looked at her askance. Her family took it hard. Her mother called me in tears one evening, apologizing on her daughter's behalf. It wasn't mine to accept, but I told her I appreciated the gesture. I heard that her parents eventually urged Laura to move back to her hometown for a while, away from the gossip. I'm not sure if she did. As for her lover, Ryan, I suspect their fairy tale romance did not fare well under the weight of reality. I never spoke to him again after our alley confrontation, but through the grapevine I learned a few things. Not long after our divorce filing, an anonymous complaint was indeed lodged with the state licensing board about Laura's misconduct. A formal investigation followed swiftly. Ryan must have cooperated. Whether out of guilt, coercion, or disillusionment, I'll never know, because I'm told his testimony was part of the record. Facing inevitable censure, Laura surrendered her therapy license before they could revoke it. The news quietly appeared in professional bulletins, and the life she'd built over a decade crumbled overnight. The affair itself became toxic in the aftermath. Perhaps they tried to cling to each other initially, I can only imagine the fights they must have had as everything fell apart. Blame, shame, regret. Whatever love they thought they had, it likely curdled. A mutual friend mentioned that Ryan left his position at the Copper Pot around the same time. Some said he moved to another city to restart. Others claimed he simply couldn't handle the local infamy. Either way, by the time the dust settled, he and Laura were no longer together. In the end, they cost each other almost everything and still wound up alone. And me? I'd be lying if I said I emerged unscathed. I carry scars from this. Trust doesn't come easily, and the nights can still get lonely in the house that feels far too big now. But I also carry a sense of grim satisfaction. I saw my plan through. I protected myself and made sure the people who betrayed me faced consequences for their choices. In that, I found a measure of closure. After the court hearing, as I walked out into the bright summer sun, I realized I was free, truly free, of both of them. No more lies, no more suspense or rage eating me alive. The chapter was closed. I could focus on my work, maybe take that long postponed vacation, reconnect with friends without the cloud of marital troubles hanging over me. I've heard the saying that living well is the best revenge. I plan to put that to the test. I intend to live well now, on my own terms, having burned away the deceit that darkened my life. And as for Laura and her lover, wherever they are in their separate scorched worlds, I can only hope they've learned a hard lesson about playing with fire. Because in the end, the flames consumed them both.